There's been a lot of developments in the Israel-Hamas war in the last several days. The U.S. envoy has arrived in Lebanon and is attempting to broker a diplomatic resolution between the sides. Hezbollah, meanwhile, has set its own terms for a deal. Meanwhile, the fighting continues to escalate in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian situation there continues to deteriorate. On the hostage front, Israel is attempting to find new avenues to advance negotiations. Hamas continues to be steadfast in its conditions, demanding a complete IDF withdrawal and an end to the war. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. Starting with the situation in Lebanon, over the past days there have been continuous and escalating attacks between Hezbollah and Israel, as there have been over the past months. Over the weekend, there were 8 different rounds of airstrikes that were reported in the Dahya region of Beirut, and major attacks were also reported in the areas of Tzur and other areas in Lebanon. On Monday, November 18th, there were a string of major airstrikes that were reported as well, with reportedly targeting 16 different Lebanese villages in the southern parts of Lebanon simultaneously in a string of different airstrikes that occurred over 5 hours. Hezbollah also continued to fire hundreds of rockets, missiles, and drones into Israel over the last several days. In some cases, these barrages included 40 and 50 rockets that were fired simultaneously, and drones are also going underneath Israel's radars, occasionally crashing into cities in the northern parts of Israel. Among the different noteworthy incidents in the last several days, Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets targeting the central parts of Israel. One of those rockets managed to penetrate Israel's air defenses, and there was a direct hit reported in the areas between Ramat Gan and Bnei Brak. This is in the cities adjacent to Tel Aviv. In addition to that, on Sunday, November 17th, the IDF carried out a major unannounced airstrike in Beirut, assassinating Mohammed Afif. Afif is a member of the founding circle of Hezbollah from many years ago and was most famous for his role as the group's media spokesperson. However, according to reports since the assassinations of Hezbollah's leadership over the last several months, Afif also began assuming more active military roles as well, coordinating Hezbollah's operations in the different parts of Lebanon. In addition to him, Ali Tawfiq Dawik, who was the person in charge of Hezbollah's medium-range rockets, was also reportedly assassinated in the village of Joz on November 19th. With regards to the ongoing negotiations between the sides, there have been a lot of reports of progress being made in the last several days. The U.S. Special Envoy to the region, Amos Hochstein, is currently in Beirut. He is due to travel to Israel tomorrow, where he is going to continue negotiating between the sides. As a reminder, the premise of the deal is on the reinforced implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 from 2006. This resolution requires that there be no armed presence of any other actor other than the Lebanese military south of the Litani River, i.e. the areas in southern Lebanon close to the northern border with Israel. The deal involves the IDF withdrawal over a 60-day period and the Lebanese military taking control of southern Lebanon. The Lebanese military is then supposed to dismantle Hezbollah's military capabilities, dismantling their infrastructure and confiscating all weaponry. The deal also involves the establishment of an international mechanism that will be made up of several different countries that will both monitor the implementation of the deal as well as monitor the different entry points into Lebanon in order to stop Hezbollah from rearming itself. According to reports, Hezbollah has agreed to the framework of the deal and has given its quote-unquote blessing to the Lebanese government to negotiate it. However, the group has added 2 conditions. The first, that the international monitoring mechanism on the deal's implementation not involve the 2 countries, Germany and the United Kingdom, that were supposed to be part of the mechanism. This is because of Hezbollah's fraught relationship with those 2 countries. The second point, however, is much more important, and that is that Hezbollah demands that Israel not be given authority to carry out any further operations in Lebanon. That second point is likely to be the main bone of contention when it comes to the ongoing negotiation. Israel has repeatedly stated that it will only accept a deal if it is officially granted the authorization to carry out the enforcement of the deal if the Lebanese military does not live up to its part of the deal. On Monday, it was leaked that in several different news sites that the United States is attempting to add an annexed letter to the deal in order to recognize Israel's right to take such action. Right now, what is being negotiated seemingly is the wording of that annexed letter. What was leaked is that in the negotiations in Beirut, the annexed letter would recognize Israel's right to take action, quote, against immediate threats, end quote. In Israel, it was immediately reported that different elements, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, are going to reject this, and that Israel is going to insist on complete freedom to stop Hezbollah from rearming and repositioning itself in southern Lebanon. Likely what we're going to see is the negotiator Amos Hochstein coming back to Israel in order to present that side of the deal and then seeing what he can work out with the Israeli side before returning it to Lebanon. Different news sites in Lebanon have reported the Lebanese government is also attempting to find ways to soften the wording such that it would appease both Hezbollah and Israel. With regards to where things lie right now, once again, the U.S. envoy is now going to travel to Israel in order to continue the negotiations. With regards to the trajectory of where things are going, the Lebanese Al-Ahbar newspaper, which is somewhat affiliated with Hezbollah, published an article on Tuesday, November 19th, stating that these are the critical days of negotiations and that in the next 2 or 3 days we are going to learn if the trajectory is towards a ceasefire or towards a further escalation that will last until January, i.e. implying the next round of escalations will likely be until the inauguration of U.S. President Trump. Remains to be seen where things develop. Obviously, I'll report more in the coming days. Turning to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, the Israeli operation in northern Gaza is continuing to expand. Very intensive fighting is still being reported in the areas of Jabalia refugee camp and in Beit Lahia, as well as in the areas of Sajaiya and other areas of Gaza City. As a reminder, this operation was launched on October 6th and has proven to be one of the largest operations launched in the Gaza Strip since the takeover of the different Palestinian towns throughout the war. Hundreds of Palestinians, including both civilians and Hamas operatives, have been killed in this operation, and the IDF has lost close to 30 soldiers during this campaign. Just to give some context about the intensity, the number of IDF soldiers killed in the current operation in northern Gaza, and again, this operation is going on for 6 weeks, accounts for roughly 7 to 8% of the total number of IDF soldiers that have been killed in the Gaza Strip over the past 13 months. Again, that's just to give some understanding of the intensity of the ongoing fighting in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as that also tells us something about the extent that Hamas has managed to rebuild itself in the northern parts of Gaza since the IDF withdrew from there in December of 2023. Again, between 7% and 8% of all the IDF soldiers have been killed in the entire war in the Gaza Strip have been killed in this operation in northern Gaza over the last 6 weeks. Alongside this intensive fighting, the focus of most reports has been on the humanitarian situation in northern Gaza, with a complete breakdown of communication between the IDF and UNRWA, and alongside with the intensive military campaign that has led to the closure of different entry points into northern Gaza. The situation deteriorated very rapidly, which led, I remind everyone, to the United States in mid-October issuing an unprecedented ultimatum to Israel, threatening a weapons embargo if the humanitarian situation in northern Gaza does not improve within a month. Israel undertook a series of measures in order to allow more aid to enter the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in response, including opening new entry points into Gaza. And on November 12th, and also in several different news conferences after that, the United States announced that while Israel has not fully met the criteria set in the ultimatum, the measures that have been taken were substantial, and that the U.S. will continue to monitor the situation to ensure that it improves, i.e. the United States has not completely removed the ultimatum, but has deferred it, saying if the situation continues to improve, Israel is showing seriousness in living up to the U.S. expectations. Meanwhile, despite this increase in the entrance of humanitarian aid trucks, the situation in northern Gaza appears to be somewhat chaotic. There are more and more reports coming out of aid trucks being looted and a thriving black market that is growing in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as the distribution of aid is completely broken down and it appears to be complete anarchy. The height of these reports was on Sunday, a few days ago, with reports emerging that 15 aid trucks were robbed simultaneously in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Israel has reportedly been looking into different mechanisms and organizations in order to take over the distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza. Again, after the breakdown of the communication between the IDF and UNRWA, there's no central organization that is distributing the aid in Gaza. It is all different ad hoc organizations that the IDF is working with. Two plans are the ones that are being floated in the different reports with regards to what Israel is considering. The first is that the IDF will assume complete responsibility for aid distribution directly to the population, i.e., instead of the IDF transporting aid into the Gaza Strip and then another agency distributing it, the soldiers would actually distribute the aid itself. The second plan is that Israel would employ a U.S. private security company, with Orbis specifically being the company that was mentioned, that will assume responsibility for distribution in the Gaza Strip. According to reports, different members of Israel's cabinet, including Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Smotrich, are in favor of the IDF being tasked with this mission of distributing the aid. However, the IDF has voiced unequivocal objection to this plan, stating that it will become a police force and will have to divert troops from fighting towards managing the Gaza Strip. In turn, it was reported in Israel's Ynet news site that while some members of cabinet support the subcontracting of this distribution to U.S. security companies, this would require developing a new complex legal framework in order to allow this communication with a U.S. company distributing aid delivered through Israel into the Gaza Strip, calling the entire plan into question. Meanwhile, alongside this intensive fighting, the IDF has reportedly in the last several days divided the northern parts of the Gaza Strip into different zones and has also laid what is known as a breathing siege on the different areas around Jabalia refugee camp. Breathing siege usually means nothing can come in, however, population can go out. This has led to the increased evacuation of Palestinians from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, which again is contributing to a lot of people that are speculating whether Israel is tacitly implementing what has become known as the General's Plan in northern Gaza. If anyone's interested in that, I refer you to my summary that I uploaded on November 10th, where I explicitly discussed what is the General's Plan, is Israel implementing it, and why there's a lot of speculation that surrounds the idea that Israel might be implementing this. Finally, moving on to the hostage situation, the negotiations between the sides are at a complete stalemate in the last several weeks. As a reminder, there are currently 101 Israeli hostages that are still held in the Gaza Strip. While the IDF has officially confirmed the deaths of 36 of them, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has publicly stated that Israel believes that only 50 or 51 of the hostages remain alive, i.e., half of the hostages are considered alive, according to Israeli intelligence. According to different reports that are surfacing, there is growing concern in Israel in light of the changing weather patterns and winter that is starting in the Middle East. Some reports particularly are mentioning the dangers of both flooding and humanitarian situation to hostages who may be held in the tunnels in the Gaza Strip. As a reminder, the main bones of contention when it came to the negotiations between the sides relate to Hamas's continuous demand for a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a permanent ceasefire ending the war between the sides as part of any hostage negotiation and hostage exchange. Israel has outright rejected this demand and has always said that it will seek a hostage exchange. However, it is not going to accept an idea of withdrawal or an end to the war in Gaza. However, in light of this increased pressure in Israel with regards to the hostages' condition leading into winter, Israeli officials in the last several days have been attempting to devise a new approach to proposed negotiations, particularly as it has become apparent that despite the initial optimism in Israel, the death of Hamas's leader Yahya Sinwar had no impact on Hamas showing more flexibility in the negotiations. It was reported that over the past several days, the head of the Israeli Shabak, Ronen Bar, traveled both to Egypt and to Turkey, possibly in order to discuss different avenues of the negotiations. The trip to Turkey is particularly interesting in light of recent reports that Hamas may have relocated its leadership to Turkey after being asked to leave Qatar. As a side note, I'll say that both Turkey and Hamas have denied the reports that Hamas has relocated to Turkey. Remains to be seen if Turkey will play a more important role in the negotiations. In Israel, this was also denied, stating that Egypt is now going to be the main negotiator. In addition to this, on Sunday, November 17th, it was reported that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz held meetings with the head of the Israeli Mossad, Dedi Barnea, in an attempt to devise some new proposal that may breathe life into negotiations. Among others, Netanyahu has repeatedly stated that Israel will be offering a cash reward of $5 million and safe passage to any Gazan who facilitates the safe return of an Israeli hostage. However, I will say that despite Netanyahu's repeated statements about such proposals, none of them have actually been made in public. Israel has not broadcasted this to the Gaza Strip, so they're being stated that it is going to be offered. However, it is not actually, seemingly at least, being implemented. According to reports in Israel's Channel 13 and other news sites, the head of the Mossad and other elements of Israel's negotiating team asked Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz to allow the team to show more flexibility in Israel's positions in the negotiations, stating that otherwise there will be no movement on the deal and the negotiations will continue to be frozen. According to reports, the requests were denied by Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, both stating that they are in favor of advancing smaller scale deals, something that Hamas has continuously rejected, instead of showing more flexibility at this time. Those are my highlights from the past several days in the Israel-Hamas war. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone you think might be interested. Subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.